The 2022 release Evergreen from designer Hjalmar Hawk and publisher Guild very much fits recent game trends. In terms of the subject matter, each player is trying to build up their own world, you're planting sprouts on it, and they're growing over time, and you are trying to have the sun hit those trees to collect light. That's one of the scoring mechanisms in the game, and it very much fits other recent games that focus a lot on nature or animals in the nature, building up habitats for those animals. It's very much a soft focus where you are trying to celebrate the environment and grow it as well as you can. It's calming, looking at all this green and imagining the nature around you. The gameplay fits that trend as well, and it's another recent trend that a lot of games have had where you are very much doing your own thing in Evergreen. Everyone has their own world. What I do on my world does not affect anyone else. There is a drafting phase where we each have a bit of input in terms of what's available to other people and how we will score at the end game, but I'm making my own world. You're making yours. We'll see how things come out at the end. Let's get a little more into the gameplay. To set up Evergreen, each player takes their own dual layered game board and places pegs at the marked locations on the various tracks. The world is comprised of 6 biomes. Each indented space is where a tree can grow. There are some crevices that are off limits to make it more difficult for your forest to connect as you're building across the entire world. You have a shared pool of wooden bits that just stay in the box and you pull them out as needed. I'll set those on the side. Each player gets their own sun to show where the light is shining from in a particular round. The game lasts 4 rounds. The sun will travel around the board. And at the end of 4 rounds, you score points. To finish setup, shuffle the deck, and reveal cards until you have revealed 5 fertility symbols. There are the little flowers up top there. There's 2, there's 3, there's 5. And these correspond to different biomes. You got little symbols to show what things are. We can put these at the bottom of the board right now. And right now what this is saying is at the end of the game, for each large tree that you have in this biome, you will score 2 points. 2 points for this, 1 for this. These values can change over the course of play. You shuffle other revealed cards into the deck and then reveal as many cards as the number of players plus 1. So each player is going to draft a card here. There are cards corresponding to the 6 biomes as well as a wild biome card. There are bonus actions at the bottom right of each card, and the cards give you a bit of different information. This shows you the fertility value, which would affect endgame scoring should a card end up over here. Talk about that in a moment. You have the main action that takes place in the depicted biome or anywhere in the world if you take this one, and the bonus action can take place anywhere. So when you are drafting a card, you are considering those 3 things, where you're going to take your main action, what you want the bonus action to be, and importantly, what you want left over to affect scoring at the end of the game. So the first player chooses one of these cards, and I'll go ahead and choose this. The first player, after they pick a card, they place this leaf on the leftmost card, still in the display, and if someone takes this card, then they will be first player in the next round. So someone takes this, they take this, they take this. If this is left over, then this goes over here, and now large trees in this area are worth 3 points at the end of the game. If this biome card is left behind, there's no fertility markers, it's just thrown away. If no one takes the first player marker, it goes back to the person who had it previously. When I take my action, I have 4 possible actions that I can take on a turn. I can place 3 sprouts in this biome. So these are little stumps that are growing. And let's see, maybe I want to do it like this right now. Sure. There is a bit of trouble where sometimes you put things in here and it falls over. It takes a game or 2 before you stop knocking things over. The indentations seem like they're not as helpful as they could be because you do knock things over, but If you did not have indentations on the board and you hit it, you would send stuff flying everywhere and you'd have no chance of recovery. Whereas here you can knock stuff over and they generally stay where they should be. So I can plant 3 sprouts somewhere in this biome. I can grow 2 things in this biome. If this already existed from a previous turn, I could go from a sprout to a little tree. Or if I have a little tree, I can go from a little tree to a big tree. So you would just replace what is there with the new piece. You can build plant a sprout and have a growth, but they have to be different. Same thing with B. You plant a sprout and then you grow something else, not the sprout you just planted. Or action D, anywhere in the world, either plant a sprout or do a growth action. It's the worst thing possible, but now you can do it anywhere. So if you don't get the Joker, it gives you an option for what you're trying to do. So in addition to that, the bonus action, there's 6 different types of bonus actions. This is to plant a bush. Each time you get a bonus action, you're going to move the marker over 1 space and it tells you how many times you do that action. I can plant 1 bush because there is a 1 under that marker. I can put that bush here. Bushes help you connect forest together. That is their purpose. Now you take the card, you put it on the side, and in the first round you are going to continue drafting until you have 5 cards total. So let's say, for variety, this is my next action. I can take the bonus action before I take the main action. So I am going to plant sprouts. I move this over and I plant 2 sprouts. So I can go here and here. And then I can take my main action. I'll use the growth action to replace those sprouts with trees. So the bonus and main actions are done independently. Either one first. That's my action. Now I'm done. Let's say this is the thing I do next. So I get the main action in this space. Maybe I want to grow this twice. And I have a petal action. I move the petal marker over, and whatever the number is, I score that many points. So I'm just taking actions completely at random here. Probably not going to score well, but we'll see. See how it works out. So I also want to show you the variety of actions available. So I want to make sure I do different things. Sure. This is just what I had before. Let's do something different. All right, here, I take this one. I can have from a sprout, move over here, I can go from a sprout to a small tree. So I plant 3 sprouts in this area. Maybe I want to connect these. There's reasons for doing that. And then I get 1 sprout to a small tree. Let's do this one. That's my 4th action. 5th action, let me get a different thing. And sure, we'll do this one, which is lakes. So again, I get the main action. Maybe I plant 3 trees, 3 sprouts. And then I get to put in 1 lake. I move this marker over, I get a lake. And when a lake comes in, it gives growth to 2 adjacent spaces orthogonally. So these 2 grow. I could put the lake here, or maybe I get a lake in the future and then grow these 2 big trees. That might be valuable. I'll show you why in a moment, but it doesn't affect the in-game scoring because right now there are none of these cards down here. Although, of course, I'm just faking rounds. I'm not doing actual rounds. The only bonus action we did not see was one that lets you go from a small tree to a large tree. That's it. So you're planting bushes, you're putting down lakes, you're putting sprouts, going to small trees, going to large trees, and bulbs or petals, which just give you points. After the 5 cards are taken in a round, you now look and see what trees get hit by the sunlight that's going this way across the world. So you can go column by column, and if a small tree is hit by light, then you score 1 point. If a large tree gets hit, it's 2 points. So this is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. So 7 points. If a small tree cast a shadow of 1 space. So if this were the current setup, this tree would see sun, this tree does not because it's in the shadow of the other one. So you're trying to plant trees on your world so that sun can hit them and score points. A large tree cast a shadow of 2 spaces. So if we had this, then these don't see any sun. Of course, they're only shrubs, so it doesn't matter. Or sprouts. Here we go. Now I'm going to destroy my world to try to set this up. So if we have something like this, 2 points for this, none, none, and then 1 point for this because it is out of reach of the shadow of this small tree. Okay. Put everything back. After you score for the sunlight, you then look at your largest connected forest and you score 1 point for each thing in that forest. And here's where the bushes come in handy because they count as part of the forest, but they do not score any sunlight. They don't block anything. They provide no shade. They're very low to the ground, just like these sprouts. Sprouts do nothing. Someone in a game actually asked if lakes cause shadows. They do not. So I get 4 points for this forest here. And there you go. 12 points at the end of round 1. It's okay. It's fine. The sun goes over here. These cards go away. The round marker comes down. And now we're only going to have 4 cards in this round. But everything you do in that first round is also trying to set you up for scoring for the rest of the game. You're trying not to block things. So this is not ideal because this tree gets sun and this doesn't. But because it's a forest, ideally it's only going to get bigger over time and I will score more points for that connected forest than I will lose for not getting sun. It's this balance of the two. You want things separate for sunlight and together for the forest. And you're trying to maximize that over the 4 rounds of the game. So ideally, I'm going to grow these two. So I will be looking for this or this during the round as I'm drafting. I want to think about growing these as well into large trees because they're worth 2 points at the end of the game. However, one drawback. Let's bring up something here. If the card that is left behind in the round has the skull on it, there are 6 cards in each biome and there's 1 skull in each biome. If this is the card that is left over after drafting, you go to the most recently revealed card of that type and flip it face down. And then the skull goes out of play. So the skull is a one-shot hit at the points over here. If I'm not growing big trees up here, if I don't think that's going to matter to me, well, I might not draft this because I don't care if that gets hit for points. If someone else is really focusing and building up points there, possibly you want to hit it. Of course, this is worth 3 points right now and I've done nothing here. It's hard to do everything and balance everything because at the start of the round, you'll have 5 cards come out. And what do I want? Well, this is worth 3 points each, so maybe I want to start building here. However, this is left behind, which could wreck the scoring for this area, which I might want to build up since I'm already trying to connect this. Maybe this would be good to let that go. Okay, this, who cares? Maybe, possibly, might not be interesting, except you can go from a sprout to a small tree, and now I do that twice. These values tend to get better over time. Some of them are just like 1, 1, 2. If you're already at the far side and you do the bush again, I get 2 more bushes. I do it again, I get 2 more bushes. And so you can really accelerate the power of a bonus action if you specialize in that. If I hit this over here, then I can turn 3 sprouts into small trees. So anytime that I would take something like this, I could put 3 sprouts down and then immediately take that action and make them small trees. So you want to focus on a particular bonus in order to get the most value out of it. But at the same time, what are you building where? How valuable is it going to be at the end of the game? And does it help you connect things to score points for that forest? Those are all the things that you were trying to consider together out of a draft. That's it. Each card does a lot of different things and has a lot of different appeal to you based on what you're trying to do. If you go in for petals, that doesn't let you build things up on the board, but after 3 petals, every petal you get is worth 4 points. And how valuable is that compared to what you would get? It's hard to judge. I've played 4 times and it's still hard to judge at this point. I won 1 game by going really heavy with the petal strategy. I won another game by building up this forest. By the end of the second round, I think I was getting 20 points off the forest. It was close to it. And then so I got that at the end of the other rounds as well, just a little bit more each time, worrying about first connecting that forest and maximizing that out in the last few rounds, going from medium trees to large ones in order to get these endgame points. So there's different focuses that you can have. So you're going to draft. After 4 cards, score this way. 3 cards, score going this way. 2 cards, this way. So things accelerate. You can understand why they make the round shorter, because ideally you're growing that whole time, and it's balancing out the value you get from the sun versus the value of that forest. If you had 5 cards every single round, the value of that forest would not be as important as the value of the light coming across here. At least that's what it feels like based on my 4 plays. So you draft all that time, you score points at the end, see who has the highest score and wins. As I mentioned, I played Evergreen 4 times, twice with 2 players, once each with 3 and 4 players on a review copy from Horrible Guild. And the gameplay changes based on the player count for 2 reasons. One being the fixed size of the card deck. There are 6 cards for each biome and 6 for the anywhere in the world action, and that doesn't change. So with 2 players, we went through the entire deck, shuffled the discards in the 4th round, and barely got into those cards again. So we pretty much saw everything only once. Whereas with 3 players, we went through more of the deck. And with 4 players, we actually had to shuffle twice. So you're seeing cards multiple times, and that affects the way that you decide to take cards. Because if I see the orange card with 3 fertility in a 4-player game in the first round, I know it's coming back. I'm going to put it aside, use it, it's going in the discards, it's coming back at least once, possibly again, which means I can work to build up the orange and then hopefully land that in the fertility section to make use of what I've already built. May not happen. It all depends on the turn order and how things come up, but it has more of a chance of happening in a 3 or 4-player game than it does in 2-player, because you barely see anything in the 2-player game. If I take that 3 fertility orange card, it's not going in that section, and that's it. So the cap on the value of the large trees in that orange section is going to be smaller. So it's much more of enriching yourself to possibly not help something else. There's those trade-offs that come into play that don't come into play as much with 3 and 4 players because everything is cycling so much. There's also the aspect that you have to play defense, because if everyone else is building up the orange card and that 3 fertility orange goes back in the deck, it comes up again, they all want it to be left behind, and pretty much you're going to have to take it unless you want to hand them a bunch of points. But even if you take it, depending on when it is in the round, it might come back again and you'll have to fall on it again. So it's a different sort of feel based on the player count just by the way the cards cycle. Similarly, the second reason it's different from player count is the number of cards available. You have the number of players plus 1. So in a 2-player game, there's only 3 cards. If a card comes up with a skull that's going to hit a biome that I've been building up in, well, if I don't take that card, my opponent is definitely not taking that card because it's going to hurt my endgame score. So you pretty much have to take the card. Whereas with more players, there's more opportunity for someone else to decide, well, I want to build in that biome, or I want that bonus action that's on the card, or both. And maybe they're going to take it. You don't feel the necessity to really fall on that, also because other people are probably building in that same biome as well. You get a different balance of how people build when there's more players in the game. So you're in bed with other people trying to up the value of certain biomes. Ideally, you're making a little bit more than they are, but you will do it collectively because you have 3 large trees, I have 4. Yeah, it helps both of us against everyone else. So we're definitely going to leave that behind. So the player order works a little differently, or at least feels a bit differently with more players, just because it does change how you view what's available. Because if you choose first, you have the option of anything. You can't take the first player marker. You're not guaranteed to go first again, but you often go first again in a 2-player game because there's only one other player choosing. They may or may not want that card, and you might be first again. Okay, you get first choice. With 4 players, first choice feels a little more important just because you can almost definitely grab something that fits with whatever your plan is. But there's an advantage to going later in the turn order because you can affect what ends up in that fertility track. And that effect is magnified in the 4-player game because people are making choices, hoping to land something there. It's probably going to be taken away, and then you get the final say. And you can build based upon what exactly you know is going over there, rather than everyone else speculating on what's going over there. So things change a bit. So there's that mild interaction where you're affecting things and making choices based on what you think other people are going to do. But again, you're going to have your own world, and no one's going to affect how those sprouts and trees and bushes, whatever, are going to be laid out on your board. That is entirely up to you to build that out. And then hope to get the cards that are going to feed whatever you're trying to do. One other comment to make. With 2 players, we had plenty of wooden components, but with 4, we ran out. We ran out of sprouts. We ran out of the small trees. And I guess the publishers are expecting you to play a certain way. I'm sure in all of the prototypes and playtesting they've done, they kept count of how many things were on the board at a certain time, and they produced the game with that in mind. So we did not accelerate to large trees, I guess, at the rate that they thought we would. Similarly, we ran out of bushes. I think we were almost out of water. So I don't know if we were using things really effectively where someone was specializing in bushes and someone in water, and so you're getting 2 water at a time, 2 bushes at a time, building all this up and then running out of resources. So at a certain point, we started taking sprouts and then turning them upside down, and then that's a bush, and doing this other thing, and this was water, and just sort of making things up to make it fit. You might want more resources, but this is what you have. And the rules mention if you run out, just use something else. So that may come up in your game too, depending upon how people build. If everyone just goes to small trees, you're going to run out of small trees, and then you have to figure out what to do. The insert here is meant to hold all the components. Because the game is about building your own world, it has this very green environmental focus to it, the publishers went with a paper tray, no plastic here. There's biodegradable plastic holding all the components, and then you throw that out and you put everything in the little trays here. But you'll notice that things sort of leak through. Stuff doesn't quite hold down, so things do fall through the gaps from one level to another. If you're going to have this game vertically on your shelf, you will need backs. But if you do it horizontally, then it doesn't matter because you can keep things separate, or of course just sweep it all in the box and just pick out things as you need them, as it suits you. So just something to note. It's a neat idea, but these keep coming up and then stuff slides around, and then to try to fit it down again, you got to divide it all up and this, that, and the other, and maybe just have a bucket, scoop it all in the bucket and be done with it. That's my normal way to do things, so thought I'd bring that up in case you were wondering. But then you get a taste for what Evergreen is like. Building your own world, trying to keep an eye out on what other people are doing for that stock market effect at the end. And ideally, you put it all together and have the sun shine on you in victory. One thing I forgot to mention about Evergreen is something that you should keep in mind when you play this and pretty much any other game out there, because it's a truism that comes into play for games in general, but in Evergreen, wow, it really stuck out. And that is the first time that you play Evergreen, you're not going to play your best. It's just not going to happen. I did a 2-player game. We played again immediately, again with 2 players, and we were each at least 20, 30 points higher than what we had before. I think I was more like 40 points higher than what I had the first game. And then we played a 3-player game with that same person from the 2-player game and a new person. And the experienced people were like 20, 30 points ahead of the new person. Someone else showed up, played a 4-player game, and the 3 of us who had played before were way ahead of that new 4th person. It really takes a game to figure out the basics of how you're laying things out in the world and how you're going to maximize those conflicting desires to build a connected forest, yet separate things that are going to see the sun, and how you're going to optimize all of that. It takes that one game of experience, and it drives me nuts when I know that people review a game after a single play. I do that sometimes as well. I get first impressions for how things come across, but that's really not playing the game. That was learning the game. And that second play, now that you know the rules, now that you've internalized it, now that you've grasped the entire scope of the game and how your early actions carry out over the entire playing of the game and impact everything, now you've got all that in mind. And for that second game, you're playing for real. It now becomes you actually competing. So the first time you play, you might do fine, but you will undoubtedly do better the second and third and fourth time you play. So give it that one game learning experience, especially when you're teaching new people. I don't know what sort of advice you might want to give them. Maybe nothing. Maybe you just spot them some points. The rules specify that the first player in the game starts with 0 points and the second player 1 point, third 2 points, fourth 3 points, which seems inconsequential. We've never had a game that close where it would be decided by a couple of points. So I don't quite know where that came up from. I haven't seen it be meaningful, that small difference in points. But there definitely is a handicap for new players where you might want to give them, spot them 10 points. Give them a leg up. Maybe they'll surprise you and they'll do better than you expect. But that has not been my experience so far.